As Mr. Huizinga said, he was a state legislator. I was not governor, but I was a former hockey player, like yourself. Did you agree with Mr. Dodge that the banks don't pay any fees when there's a data breach? I haven't heard you respond to that claim.
Congressman Duffy, the banks, again, the system of how this all gets sorted out is complicated, but it is certainly true that the issuing banks pay in all sorts of ways if there's a breach, including the cost of reissuing the cards, subject to possible partial reimbursement in the future, as well as making the consumer whole through a complicated series of transactions. Okay. So,
okay. And just to be clear, does the whole panel support federal preemption? Does anyone disagree with that concept? I think I've heard everyone say they agree.
Only if it's a high standard that preserves protections for consumers.
We support it.
Okay. So quickly, just so I understand, talking about when the card is present, what percentage of the fraud comes from a fraudster who steals data and reproduces cards and makes purchases, as opposed to, you know, the guy who had his wallet lifted and, you know, someone goes in and uses actually the card?
The majority of it, excuse me, Congressman, the majority of it is people scraping cards and using counterfeit cards, and the people who do the lost and stolen, some of that happens, but that's a minority of the transactions, not counting for the online stuff.
So when we talk of, you know, chip versus chip and PIN, if we just at least get to chip, we're going to address a vast majority of the fraud that's taking place right now when card is present? Is that fair to say?
I would say if in a static world, it would have an effect, but we don't live in a static world. The reality is if there's a single line of defense between the fraudsters and their ability to commit fraud, in this case it would be chip, then they'll focus all their energy on breaking that. We've seen examples where they've done it already, and we've simply argued that one of the baseline tactics of cyber hygiene is two-factor authentication. We should require that at the point of sale as well.
But I mean, are you saying that we're going to see more, you know, pocket thieves out there? I mean,
no. I'm saying that fraudsters will develop new and innovative ways to crack the chip and commit fraud.
Is that happening?
Congressman Duffy, if I may, the chip will defend against counterfeit, lost, and stolen at the point of sale. It will button down the point of sale of physical environment. Once that environment is secured, fraud will then move to the card not present environment.
Right.
It's what we observe in the Asia Pacific and European theaters who've had chip technology. Now, the chip technology is, you cannot clone it. So what we'll see is it will migrate.
So how far away are we from tokenization for online purchases?
Tokenization is a technology that's been around for 10 years. And now the acquiring community and technology vendors and the price points have come down. So point-to-point encryption coupled with tokenization, coupled with EMV at the point of sale is how we get to devaluing the data so that it's useless.
So with if the card not present, online purchases, the technology is there but just not implemented yet to secure those transactions?
Apple Pay has what I call an early stage version of, I don't want to say primitive, but early stage version of tokenization. And it's had some other breach issues, but it's kind of one of the first kind of tokenization platforms to come to market.
I want to be clear. So when we have a chip, does a retailer, are they able to maintain data about the card in their database if you just have a chip card as opposed to a magnetic strip?
Yes, again, Congressman, the chip is just going to work at the point of sale. How that merchant stores data.
Can they store? So my question is, listen, we've heard about all the retailers who've had data breaches. If we migrate to the exclusive use of chips, does that mean that retailers are no longer keeping personal consumer data in their databases, which means they're not at risk to have breaches any longer?
No, again, it's just taking off the threat at the point of sale. So it's a critical layer, but it's not a silver bullet.
But on the back end, retailers still keep
in the back end of the store, the information could be replaced, though, by tokenization, could be protected by point-to-point
Do you have recommendations on how long retailers are recommended of keeping financial information about consumers? How long should a retailer keep that information?
It's really not necessary to keep that information.
So,
Congressman, if I could just jump in. A couple of things. First, many retailers have instituted encryption for that information when it comes in, so that if it ever was acquired, it would be in a format where it would be useless to a criminal. Further, they have no desire to keep information they don't need, nor to keep information.
But do they need any information is my question. Could actually retailers, after 30 days, wipe those databases clean so you don't have, 6 months of consumer data or a year of consumer data? You might only have 15 days or 30 days of consumer data. Isn't that really one of the risks, that we have so much data being collected and stored, not just from the government, but from retailers?
So the information that retailers collect is designed to allow them to provide the concierge-type services that they want. Consumers generally want receiptless returns. So there's an element of information that consumers have voluntarily said, we want to be able to, you have this information so that we can do these.
And I don't know that I've ever been asked to volunteer to enter into one of the concierge services. I think they're just offered to me, and that information is kept on my card. And I do think there's a consumer protection issue here when we're not asked. It's just given to us and you keep that information. My time.
Time of the gentleman has expired.